Picture this dusty attic, a box of old black and white photos no one's touched in decades. You hold one up to the light, a busy street scene from the 1880s, horse-drawn carriages, top hats, long dresses. Everything looks exactly how history told you it should, until you see him. One man in the crowd wearing strange round glasses, a casual jacket that looks almost modern, and in his hand something that looks unsettlingly like a small metal rectangle with a dark glass front. Not a book, not a notebook, more like a phone. Your brain does a double take. How can something that looks like a smartphone be hiding in a photograph taken almost 150 years ago? Now imagine that photo isn't just a quirky illusion but collateral damage from a secret 19th century experiment that accidentally ripped open time itself. Today on Chronicle Crafter, we're stepping into a what-if timeline? What if time travel was accidentally invented in the 19th century? We'll fuse real historical mysteries, creepy old photographs, and unexplained events to explore a world where one forgotten inventor broke the rules of time and history has been leaking clues ever since. Stay with me, because after this, you may never look at old photos the same way again. The 19th century looks old-fashioned in sepia, but it was the original tech boom. Steam engines shrank continents, railways stitched together empires, the telegraph lets messages race faster than any horse. Photography freezes time on glass. You had Faraday playing with magnetism, Maxwell writing the equations of light, and inventors electrocuting anything they could find just to see what happened. Electricity, magnetism, motion, light. The same building blocks we use today for particle accelerators and quantum experiments were already in curious Victorian hands, just without safety guidelines. So here's our what if. Somewhere in that blur of labs, workshops, and smoky back rooms, an unknown inventor accidentally stumbles upon a time anomaly. Not with sleek sci-fi machines, but with brass coils, humming dynamos, and a dangerous amount of curiosity. Old newspapers are full of strange reports, mysterious lights, people vanishing, unexplained explosions. But what if just one of those wasn't an accident? What if it was the first glitch in time? In our alternate timeline, history forgot his name. So we'll give him one Edmund Fairchild, not a famous scientist, not a nobleman or a royal engineer, just a gifted tinkerer in a cluttered workshop somewhere in London around 1873. Fairchild is obsessed with two things: the telegraph, sending messages across space, photography, freezing moments in time. He starts asking a dangerous question. If I can send a signal over a wire, could I send it across a moment? He builds what he calls the temporal resonator, a ring of copper coils, a spinning flywheel, glass tubes crackling with static, and a chair bolted into the center. His goal isn't to travel, it's to peek, to see a second into the future or the past. Like nudging opens a door. One stormy night, lightning hits the building. The resonator overloads. The machine doesn't nudge the door. It kicks off the hinges. When the flash fades, Fairchild's workshop is scorched. The clocks on the wall are all wrong. The window looks out on the same street, but with different posters, different carriages, different people. He stumbles outside and realizes he's still in London. But the year is 1893. The first accidental time traveler isn't from the future. He's from the past, stranded 20 years ahead. If someone started jumping around the 19th century timeline, history wouldn't just sit there politely, it would glitch. So let's look at a few real mysteries through the lens of our Fairchild timeline. First, the Mary Celeste, 1872, a ship found drifting in the Atlantic, perfectly seaworthy, cargo intact. Crew, completely gone. In our scenario, Fairchild's malfunctioning resonator doesn't just move him, it creates random temporal bubbles. One such bubble appears on the Mary Celeste. The crew steps through a door that wasn't there a second ago and vanishes into another decade or another version of history. No bodies, no sign of struggle, just a ship left behind like an empty shell. Next, Jack the Ripper, 1888. The killer who haunted London then seemed to vanish into thin air. In the Fairchild timeline, what if the Ripper isn't a demon in human form, but a time tourist from the future? Someone using stolen 19th century blueprints of the resonator, jumping in and out of foggy Whitechapel, leaving no trace, no consistent eyewitness description, no clear motive that fits the era. Once the device burns out, or they're forced back to their original time, the murders stop. History is left with a mystery and a handful of unsolved case files. And the great airship wave, 1896, 1897, reports across the United States of strange flying machines. Decades ago, airplanes became common. In a world with 19th century time travel, those aren't alien ships. They're timecraft proto-machines from a 1920s or 1930s future accidentally popping into the sky of the wrong decade like radio stations overlapping. To people on the ground, it's impossible for technology. To us, it's the visible bruise left by a timeline that's being bent too hard. Time travel isn't just about one person moving around. It's about everything they change without meaning to. Fairchild, stranded in 1893, does what inventors do. He writes sketches, talks. He tries to rebuild his resonator. Maybe he shares ideas about radio before radio should be invented. Maybe he hints at atomic energy without fully understanding it. Those ideas seed themselves in curious minds. Patents arrive a few years too early. A young engineer hears a strange lecture and thinks, can energy really come from inside the atom? By the time we reach the early 1900s, this altered timeline is a little off. Certain technologies, like wireless communication or early computing tricks, arrive just slightly ahead of schedule. Financial markets experience bizarre spikes, tied to mysterious investors who always seem to guess right. Time smugglers using future knowledge in Victorian stock exchanges. Military strategists sketch out weapons that sound suspiciously like they belong in World War II during World War I. From the outside, it just looks like brilliant innovation or lucky timing. But underneath, it's the chaotic fingerprint of time interference, the result of one 19th century machine that never should have been turned on. Chapter 6, The Paradox Problem, Time Fights Back in Video Background Sound, Dark, Slowly Intensifying Tension Bed. Whoa. The more you bend time, the more it wants to snap. In our Fairchild timeline, the resonator technology slowly spreads, quietly, secretly. A hidden circle of scientists in London, Berlin, New York, experimenting with localized time jumps, 10 minutes back, an hour forward, sending objects instead of people. But then the paradoxes start. A scientist prevents an accident that originally inspired her to study physics. And without it, the younger version of her never goes into science, which means she never builds the device that saved her. Events write and rewrite themselves like someone scribbling on the same page repeatedly until the paper tears. Reality compensates with glitches. People who remember two versions of the same event. Buildings that always had a clock tower, except there are photographs with no clock tower. Journal entries where the date doesn't match the day of the week. Fairchild realizes the awful truth. His resonator hasn't just moved him through time. It has turned the entire 19th and early 20th century into a looping draft. And drafts don't last forever. Somewhere down the line, the timeline will have to choose a final version and erase the others, including him. Every good paradox story needs a reset button. In our scenario, it comes in the form of something mundane, a fire. Fairchild, desperate to stop the damage, gathers his notes, blueprints, and the last working resonator in his workshop. He activates one final time jump, not to travel, but to collapse every unstable branch back into one surviving timeline, The energy overload triggers a blaze that consumes the building, his machines, and all his records. To the fire brigade, it's just an unfortunate accident in a cluttered inventor's lab. To time itself, it's a hard reset. The wildest branches of altered history are pruned away. We get our version of the 20th century. But resets are never perfect. A few anomalies remain, like dust on a polished mirror, the Mary Celeste, Jack the Ripper's vanishing act, airship sightings before their time, a photograph where one man in Victorian London looks like he's holding a smartphone, odd details that don't quite fit, like echoes from a timeline that tried very hard to edit itself out of existence. What if those are the scars of 19th century time travel, trying and failing to be forgotten? Of course, this is a what-if story, a speculative timeline, a thought experiment weaving together real mysteries and an imaginary inventor. But here's the fun part. We don't need working time machines to travel through time. Every old photograph you scroll past, every unsolved event from the 1800s is a window into a world that once existed, exactly as real as ours. And maybe the reason these stories haunt us, Mary Celeste, Jack the Ripper, airships in the wrong century, is because our brains instinctively feel that history is not as fixed as we pretend it is. So next time you see a strange face in a Victorian crowd photo or hear about a mystery that has no logical explanation, ask yourself, is this just a gap in our knowledge or a glitch from a timeline that almost was? You've been watching Chronicle Crafter. If you enjoyed this journey through a twisted version of history, hit like, drop a comment with the mystery you'd like to see reimagined next, and subscribe so you don't miss our next trip. You never know who or when might be staring back.